You are listening to the Horse Radio Network, part of the Equine Network family.
What a beautiful day for horses in the morning.
You are listening to the number one horse podcast in the world. Here is your entertaining look at the horse world and the people in it.
Well, good Wednesday morning, everybody. I am Glenn the Geek in Ocala, Florida.
And I'm Jamie Jennings in Norman, Oklahoma. You're listening to Horses in the Morning on the Horse Radio Network for Wednesday, January 10th, episode 3340. Good morning, horse people.
It's Wednesday morning. That means Jamie and Glenn are back to talk horses with all of you. Well, let's be honest. Jamie talks horses. Glenn is just here to hassle Jamie. Enjoy the show.
Well, thank you, everybody, for joining us. We have a fun show planned for you today. We a couple of weeks ago, we tried to get Jane Myer on from equiculture.net to talk to us about dung beetles, but we had a connection issue that day. Well, she's coming back. I've confirmed. We got everything set up. So she should be here. Yes.
You finally get to talk about your poop beetles.
I do. It seems like this is the year of poop. When you were gone last Friday, I did a whole segment on poop in 1894. So it's the year of poop. That's what our topic is.
Congratulations.
Yeah, apparently, we're going to be talking a lot about this year. And we also have our first in a series by Morton Buildings on designing considerations to help you ensure you get the barn you want for now and into the future. That's a 3-part series, and we'll give you part 1 today. You have weird news?
Yeah, just a little.
Okay, good. Well, I'll tell you what, we had a wild day here in Florida and the South, all over the South, all over the East Coast, actually, yesterday. So we got hit, the Panhandle got it worse than we did down here. They had a lot of damage from tornadoes up there. But when it hit Ocala, there was at one point 4 tornado warnings. They were tracking signatures of 4 tornadoes all around Ocala. And it got really, really windy here at the house, for about 10 minutes. And I could tell, well, this is windier than normal. And then it turns out that about a half a mile from us, they were tracking what they thought was a tornado. So that was pretty close. One of our listeners, who also is an auditor, Heather, whose house we stayed at the last hurricane, was in her bathroom, and she texted us during that and said, "What the hell?" So she was a little nervous over there. Apparently, she was getting really bad. And then when I looked at the map, the little dot where the tornado warning started was like over her house.
Oh
so
gosh.
She didn't have damage. She was okay, other than being a little terrified. But there were a couple of actually RV parks that got taken out with the RVs rolled over. I can't imagine being in one of those when that happens.
I will tell you, my mom is in a facility in, let's see, I guess it would be Palatka, Florida, right? Yeah. So I looked at the map yesterday, and this storm was stretching from basically the bottom of Florida all the way up to Canada. And it was crazy. So I call her and I'm like, "Mom, I just wanted to see if you're okay." And she's like, "Yeah, your brother just got here. He has been," and I hear him in the background going, "Mom, there was tornadoes. I couldn't come." And she's like, "I don't understand what the big deal is. There's nothing going on." And I was like, "Justin, could you please wheel her to the window? Just let her see." She was like, "I don't understand why he wasn't here earlier." Justin's like, "There's tornadoes."
It was a wild day. It really was.
So not everybody noticed that there was weather going on.
It was pretty wild. I felt like you. Out there in Tornado Alley yesterday.
Yeah, unfortunately, you don't have, and Florida doesn't have the extreme weather tracking systems that they have here. They'll tell you where it's been, where it's going, and where it's heading, next.
And
it's crazy.
The other thing we don't have, safe rooms or basements. So,
yeah.
There's that.
You mean you don't have a built-in tornado shelter in your house? That's so weird.
You get into the innermost room, which is usually a closet or a bathroom, like that's really going to help, right? But there were some bizarre pictures, too, of houses that were between really narrow houses, and the middle one was cocked on its side. It's like, how did that happen? The other two are fine. It's just bizarre. Weather is bizarre. Awesome. But anyway, we're here. We survived, and we found out from our neighbors up at the new property that the stuff we have up there already survived. So all is good for us, not so much for other people here in Florida. And guess what? Round 2, Friday. So,
Oh, that sounds fun.
yeah. So be safe, everybody. We hope everybody survived okay and their properties did as well, and you get your power back soon.
You know what's really fun is it Sunday and Monday, it's supposed to be like -20 here, wind chill. So that's going to be fun.
There you go.
Do you know what's really awesome about that is I am going out of town. So I told my farm sitter, I'm like, I got round bells and blankets on. You'll be fine.
All right. Daily Whinnie time. Happy birthday to a couple of our auditors, Sabrina Penrod, and two of our longest auditors, Susanna Hahn and our cruising buddy, Lynn. They've been auditors for 8 years since we started this, and we're going to see Lynn in a couple of weeks. We'll see you on the cruise. She has never missed a cruise. She's been on every one of them.
She actually also helped me at the Thoroughbred Makeover with my freestyle.
There you go. Well,
she's
Lynn,
awesome.
Lynn, we're looking forward to seeing you there. And your turn.
Man, I had just a week. And it's only Wednesday, but Monday afternoon, I got an email from New Vocations. And New Vocations is the adoption organization that I adopted my American Pharaoh baby from, American Hustle, who I called Pharaoh, who I lost a couple weeks ago. And they messaged me and they were like, hey, we just wanted to see if this is okay. If it's not, we will totally pull it. It's up to you. I don't want to upset you. But they did a photo shoot with Pharaoh before I got him. And he was only there like 3 days, but he was so chill that they did a photo shoot with him. And they're
like
sending
with a
out
professional photographer and everything?
Yeah.
Wow.
And they have him like Western walking around in the field. And these pictures are beautiful. And they said, we would totally not publish these in our newsletter if it will upset you. So please let us know. I thought that was so incredibly kind of them. They were like, we know you went through a lot with him and we don't want to upset you. And we just want to see what you think. And I was like, they're beautiful. And I said, what a great way to continue his memory, number one. And number two, like to show a thoroughbred that's off the track for 2 days and he's tacked up Western walking around in the field. I'm like, yeah, publish him. I think it's beautiful. And so it was just very kind of them to reach out to me. And then, that happened. And then in the afternoon, I go get the mail. And oh my God, Claire Runnelson is an auditor, a new auditor of ours. And she drew a picture of Pharaoh and mailed it to me, sent a really sweet letter. It's like a colored pencil kind of drawing, and it is so beautiful. She even included, it made me cry, the scar on his face from where I super glued his face together.
Oh my gosh. Please tell me there was a can of super glue right beside it.
It's just so good. And I mean, there was no question who it was when I opened it up, but it was just such a beautiful thing. Claire, thank you so much. That was just incredibly kind. And I only cried twice that day. So it's fine. But like to see the little scar where I super glued his face together, it's like, oh my God. It was beautiful and a very sweet gesture. And Claire, it was very sweet. And I'm giving you a hug. Thank you.
Thank you, Claire. Appreciate it. And we did have a couple of new auditors, too, I wanted to acknowledge. Susan Weber and Rena McFarlane. We want to welcome both of you. If you haven't joined the auditor room, just search for HRN Auditors on Facebook, and we'll let you in now because you've joined the club.
And remember, if he pronounces your name wrong, it's a badge of honor.
McFarlane. I don't know how else you would say that one.
Could be Rena. You don't know.
Oh, it could be Rena. Yeah. It could be. I was looking at McFarlane. I wasn't looking at the four-letter word. There was a news story that we know everybody involved, and they've been on our show, so I wanted to cover it. And that is Michael Blowen started years ago, I think 20 years ago. He moved to Lexington, Kentucky, and he started something called Old Friends Farm. You've heard Michael on this show several times, and we've met him in person and have taken tours and done all of that.
And Old Friends is a place basically where all the kind of famous old retired thoroughbreds who are no longer breeding or were geldings all go to live. And they actually started satellite facilities there's one in New York. There's the one in Lexington. I think there's one other one. I mean, they had Rapid Redots in New York who just passed. I have a picture of him on my wall. Like this is an amazing organization, amazing facility. And it was a dream that Michael Blowen had. And I was fairly shocked to read the news. But when you read further, it's not as, I guess, terrifying as I thought.
Well, he decided that he's going to join his racehorses and going to have his own paddock. He's going to retire.
You can pay to go give him cookies.
Yeah, that's right. He's going to retire. He decided that, well, he started out with a few horses. I remember visiting that place back in like 2008 when we lived in Lexington, and it was maybe 25 horses, and he had individual paddocks for every one too. That was the other thing. And then it grew into hundreds of horses, and, it became a full-time job that I don't think he was counting on. It was a lot of work. So he's stuck with it this long, and, he's been, he's not young, Michael. So congratulations to him for getting to retire, and thank you for all the hard work you did for these retired heroes of ours. And also, we know the guy who's taken over. So Jack Nicholson, who was the director of John, yeah, sorry. Actually, they call him Jack, too. It's both. So John Nicholson is how we know him. But he's taking over. He was the former head of the Kentucky Horse Park during the World Equestrian Games and all of that stuff. He was the head of the Kentucky Horse Park for a long time. And then he went to the Virginia Horse Park. And now he's coming back to Lexington, and he's going to take over as executive director of Old Friends. And he's going to be the man in charge. I was chatting with him yesterday. He's a good friend of ours. He's always been very kind to Horses in the Morning. Matter of fact, he co-hosted this show one time when you were out.
Oh, wow.
From his office at the Kentucky Horse Park. That's how long ago this was.
He took over the horse park when I was in school there. I went to the equine management school at the horse park, and he took over. And I was 18. He was entrenched in Lexington culture back then, so he takes over, but I was so concerned that, first of all, you read this and you're like, oh no, Old Friends is going away. Well, it's not. And Michael's not actually going anywhere. He's just handing over the reins of being a CEO.
Place, you know that. It's like guys like that never retire. So John's taking over. Congratulations to John. I was chatting with him a little bit yesterday. So at the end of February, after he's had a month under his belt, he's going to come on and talk to us about it. So
cool.
He's a good friend of the show. Now, speaking of the Kentucky Horse Park, when we did the 2010 radio show, which was about the World Equestrian Games, and Samantha and I did that back when the games was in Lexington, we had a very close working relationship with Visit Lexington. Visit Lex, it's called. And they're the tourist bureau for Lexington, and we did a lot of things with them, and we had some fun with them. And they're very creative, and they're a very industrious group. Well, they did something that was rather interesting yesterday that made the news, and I'd like to play the audio for you. It's about 2 minutes, but trust me, this is real. This is not a parody. This actually did happen.
This is the first time that we as a species have ever sent out a travel ad inviting aliens to come visit.
Lexington, Kentucky just beamed the world's first interstellar travel ad into outer space. With the help of local scientists and scholars, Visit Lex created an advertising campaign designed to invite extraterrestrials to visit Lexington. Using a modified laser, the message was aimed at the TRAPPIST-1 star system, 40 light years away.
We're targeting the TRAPPIST-1 system because we might actually get an answer in somebody's lifetime if there's somebody there watching. But the reason scientists have been interested in it lately is because of the large number of planets that it has and what's considered to be the habitable zone. So there could be life there. Why not send a signal and see if they answer?
The message contains a bitmap key with prime numbers, the elements of life, molecules for water, ethanol, and dopamine, plus horses and Lexington's iconic bluegrass landscape. The message also contained a collection of images representing Lexington, a selfie from the transmission event, and an audio recording from local blues legend T.D. Young.
Of all of the things that we've been beaming into space, why not a positive, friendly message? I think saying, hey, we're nice and friendly people, and we have horses and bourbon, and dopamine don't eat us.
We have this neat hub of creativity. It's just people who get to have the freedom to think a little bit differently. It does seem as if it's this place that is very welcoming.
Here's our chance to really demonstrate that we are a beautiful culture, a beautiful community, and that we want to share that with the galaxy, that we're the best place on earth.
The message was sent with FAA approval from the Kentucky Horse Park. So far, no unusual activity has been reported in the skies above Lexington, but we'll be waiting.
There you go.
You know what my thought was? Like, you send all of those images of beautiful horses and Kentucky to the outer space, and those people that receive it or beings that receive it are going to think that the whole world looks like this.
Yeah.
And they're going to be sorely disappointed. I thought it all looked like Lexington.
I love the comment, don't eat us.
And don't eat us.
That was the funniest part of the whole thing. So There you go, Kentucky Horse Park and visit Lex, thinking outside the box. Either that or they're really desperate for tourists. I'm not sure
that
which.
Or they're going to end the world.
All right, tell us about Cosequin, and then we'll talk a little bit about barn building.
Oh my gosh, that is so funny. Cosequin ASU joint and hoof pellets contain quality ingredients to support joint and hoof health and leave out the fillers, molasses, and alfalfa, all while delivering the taste horses love. The colors of their ingredients shine through for a difference that you can see. Visit CosequinEquine.com.
Welcome to Barn Building 101, brought to you by Morton Buildings at mortonbuildings.com.
Glenn here, founder of the Horse Radio Network and host of Horses in the Morning. We started a couple educational series last year that were a huge hit with you guys, and one of them was on horse insurance and the other one on trailers and trailer safety, and they proved very popular and educational, so we asked what else you wanted to hear about. And building a barn was high on the list. I know that's something that Jennifer and I are probably going to be doing very soon, too. So this is timely. Joining us for this series is Dennis Lee, Equestrian Product Line Manager at Morton Buildings. And this part 1 of 3, we're going to discuss design considerations to help you ensure you get the barn you want for now and into the future. Dennis, we've all heard of Morton Buildings, but tell us a little bit about the company.
Sure. Thanks, Glenn. So Morton Buildings was founded in 1903 as the interlocking fence company. We started out in the mail order woven wire business, basically, and over the years transitioned from the fencing component business to building packages, and then eventually evolved into turnkey erected building shells. We are the nation's leader in the post-frame building industry. We design, manufacture, deliver, and erect our own building product.
Well, Dennis, one of the things that we're looking at our property now, and we have 5 acres, brand new, barren land, is where do you put the barn? And, how do you figure out what's the best place to plop it? So let's talk about that first.
Yeah, so that's a great question, and site prep and site selection is probably one of the most important things to consider when building a new barn. A lot of the just nightmare stories that I see and hear from customers building barns were poorly selected or poorly prepped sites. So we all know in the wintertime, horses like to create a lot of mud, and nobody likes dealing with muddy, wet, slippery, which creates an unsafe environment. So drainage is number one. A properly graded, drained site. We like to see a site that has a minimum of a 1% slope away from the building for probably 10 to 15 feet, without it being a major, steep incline. So we don't want a 45-degree angle climb into the building. Site prep is something that we highly recommend you enlist the help of a professional. Go ahead and flag your site out and shoot some elevations and determine what sort of grading is required prior to the building. A major mistake that we see a lot of owners make is to just build the building and then try and address the site and the drainage and the grading after the building is built, which is never delivers a good result. The other thing we want to consider is zoning, permitting, what sort of plan requirements your local county or township may have, things like setbacks or maximum footprint requirements. So again, another good opportunity to enlist the help of a professional that has experience in your area. And you can always start with a phone call to your local zoning or building code office and ask them, what portions of your barn will require a permit and what their requirements are going to be up front. This is not a case where you're better to ask forgiveness than permission. So a phone call to the county or township ahead of time will save you a lot of headache.
And if you're not pouring concrete for this thing, what do you recommend for the base?
So a good firm clay or limestone base. You don't want to have mud issues as you go along. So a good firm base. You want to remove topsoil and organic material and place that somewhere else in the facility, and just make sure you have a good firm base with good drainage around the building that's not so steep you can't get into it. Think about your access. How are you going to get to and from the building with loads of hay, loads of bedding? How is your farrier going to get to the building? If you have an emergency, are you going to be able to get to the building with a veterinarian vehicle in the dark in the wintertime and that type of thing?
And also your big horse trailer. How are you maneuvering it around?
Getting in, getting turned around, getting backed up to. These are all things we highly recommend. Make an investment in some survey flags and a measuring tape, and just go out there and stick some flags on the ground and get a good visual representation of what your building is going to look like on your site.
Very good. Well, let's talk about, now that you've determined where you're going to put it, you got to determine how big it's going to be, right? And how many stalls you're going to have, and tack room and washroom and all of that stuff. So let's start there. How do you determine size?
Yeah, so number one complaint, when we go back and interview horse customers or equine facility customers after the fact, I didn't build it big enough. We built a barn for my wife and my daughter to have a horse. Well, now horses seem to multiply. Yes, horses, they're herd animals, right? So we end up with a lot more than we thought we were going to. Or the husband's decided he's going to get into trail riding also. So number one complaint, I didn't build it big enough. So if you plan to build a building for 3 horses, we highly recommend that you build a building large enough to accommodate 4 to 6 stalls. That doesn't mean that you have to actually complete the remaining stalls, but having space in that building to add those stalls at a later date is very important. The buildings are not getting less expensive over time, so there is no better time than now to build a building that is the size that you may need for your future needs. The other thing that we see, we'll have clients come to us and say, I need a 4-stall barn. Well, the number of stalls is one of it's obviously an important consideration, but it's not all there is in a barn, right? So horses require a lot of stuff. So we want to make sure and not underestimate our storage needs. So you upsize your tack room. We love to see a tack and feed room as separate rooms so that you're not enticing rodents to be in the same room as your tack. Ancillary storage. So where are your wintertime blankets, your paraphernalia you take to horse shows with you, rubber tubs, spare feed buckets, pitchforks, wheelbarrows. There's just a lot of stuff in stall barns, and we want to make sure that we have good, safe, functional storage for all those items.
One of the things that we've talked about in the past on a number of the shows, that's something that if you're buying a current place that's had an older barn, that you have a problem with and don't think about when you buy it is ventilation.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. So what do you guys do in when it comes to ventilation? What do you recommend?
So horses, my personal horses, consume and then subsequently give off 10 to 20 gallons of water a day. That is going to be in the form of urination or perspiration. So that has to go somewhere. It's going to go initially into your bedding and then into the atmosphere of your building. So ventilation is absolutely key in your stall barns. We use a combination of things. You're better off to overventilate than underventilate and have a air quality problem. So we use, obviously windows and doors, but it's also important to have ventilated overhangs. Our minimum overhang is going to be 12 inches. We also offer 2, 3, and 4 foot ventilated overhangs, as well as a combination of ventilated ridge caps and powered cupolas, so a functional cupola with a fan in it. And we will typically put those fans on either a thermostat or a humidistat. And so a humidistat being the fan will cut itself on when the humidity in the barn reaches a certain level.
So, a part of ventilation goes back to your stalls and the setup of your barn, right? How it's set up and how much access you have to air to the outside, how enclosed the barn is. So that also goes back to stall size, something that we didn't touch upon. Is there a recommended stall size? Do you find people want to make them too small? Is it 10 by 10, 12 by 12, 14 by 14?
Yeah, 10 by 10 is the minimum stall size we offer. Honestly, we build a very small amount of 10 by 10 stalls every year. 12 by 12 is going to be our most common size. We'll see people on occasion require a 10 by 10 stall, so they have a mini or they have Arabians or they have a smaller sized horse and they're just trying to save a few dollars by undersizing those stalls. We highly recommend against that for several reasons. For one, it's horse safety. So, a smaller size stall, a horse is much more likely to get cast in, which is a safety issue for the horse and for the handler. The other consideration is resale. So if this building is likely going to outlive most all of us. So these buildings, for the most part, have life beyond the initial owner. What we don't want to see you do is build a stall barn with mini and Arabian sized stalls that then causes you a resale issue, if you're in a quarter horse or a warm blood or a draft type of market down the road.
So the other thing to take into consideration and that we're having to look at too is lighting and electrical and utilities in general, water, the whole thing. And I think this is another area that people tend to underestimate. I could be wrong, but you tend to build it and there's never enough light. It just always seems
never
that
enough
way.
light. Yeah. So I was, in the early years of building our farm, I was guilty of that as well, right? You just want to get the barn built, get the horses in before winter, and you'll deal with the rest of it later. We went for a year with no lights in our barn, and that was just absolutely miserable. One thing that's different between an equestrian facility and a farm shop or storage building, you're going to be in this stall barn every day. Usually multiple times a day. And in my case, it's going to be before daylight and after dark, especially once the time changes. So lighting is absolutely key. What we love to do in grooming stables and wash stalls is we'll run 2 lights parallel to the horse's body. Your farrier and your veterinarian will love you if there's not huge shadows under the horse. Don't forget exterior lighting. So, of course, we want to have lights in the stalls. We like to have shedding lights for show horses or lights to help sync up brood mares. Again, the lights in the wash and tack stalls for farriers and grooming, but also exterior lights. And not just your decorative gooseneck light over the barn end door, but some good projection floodlights on the corners. When you have a horse run by the window in the middle of the night and you think somebody's loose in the barnyard, you're really going to appreciate having plenty of light on that barn to help you help get everything together.
Water is another issue. A lot of people use automatic waters now, obviously. We had the last boarding stable we were at, they did something that I've never seen. It was the dumbest thing I've ever seen. They actually had water run to each stall, and you could hand fill they had a little hose basically in each stall, and you could hand fill. But they put the valve on the inside of the stall. Well, what's the first thing my Hackney pony did is turn that water on. So
we see a lot of customers that like to try and DIY individual spigots to individual stalls, and they'll run PVC or PEX piping that's exposed to the horses, and there just is no secret code for running water to individual stalls other than a high quality automatic water. We use and recommend Nelson heated automatic waters, or a good old fashioned frost free yard hydrant installed in the barn aisle itself. I cringe every time I see the DIY individual waters run to a stall, because they're either going to freeze and bust and flood a stall, or you're going to have an inquisitive hackney pony chewing them off the wall and causing problems.
That is so true. All right, the final thing we'll talk about in this segment, and we have a couple more segments that we'll be doing over the next few weeks, is floors. We talked about, we use lime rock down here. You talk about limestone. They call it lime rock here in Florida, but it's basically crushed up limestone that you can compact really tight. But on top of that, you have to put your rubber mats. So talk to us about rubber mats. We see them for sale a lot now around here, but boy, the thickness and quality appears to be lacking in some of them.
Yeah, not all mats are created equal. And if you ever grab a hold of a really high quality rubber mat, you'll see that instantaneously. So like you were saying, your base in your stalls is everything. So that can be referred to in different manners across the country. So you can have ag lime, crushed limestone, stone screenings, pit gravel. In your stalls, you want a fine, granular, well compacted, very level, stable surface, and that really needs to be well compacted and very level. And then a high quality rubber mat. So we use the highest quality rubber mat that we've been able to source. The best thing about the mats that we use are they come in a larger format. So for a 12 by 12 stall, you can have 2 6 by 12 mats interlocked with each other, reducing the number of joints in the mat. We all know what it's like to have that perfectly sifted pitchfork full of manure and hit a curled up joint in a stall mat, and it all goes flying. But your low cost, low quality mats, like you'll see at some of the local farm supplies, if you can grab that mat and really bend it over easily, or if it cuts super easy with a utility knife, it's just not going to give you the service life that a super dense, heavy, high-quality mat will.
So you're looking for at least a half-inch thick? Or
half or 5/8 is the most common.
Okay. Do you recommend them in the aisles too? Or do you guys not?
We do. We use quite a few stall mats in the aisles. Now, in the aisles, what we like to see is obviously an interlocking mat, so they don't walk. They don't end up moving you down the aisle. Another great option there is pavers. So we do quite a few stall barns with either the glue down or lay down interlocking style of paver. The paver makes a very nice, quiet, safe, high traction type of surface. They can be a little bit of a bear to keep clean, so you're going to want a leaf blower or a vacuum or something to keep those pavers clean.
Well, as I said, this is a several-part series, so we're going to get into much more in the future segments that we do. Thanks, Dennis, for joining us. We really appreciate it. And, whether you're doing stalls or stall barns or riding arenas, whatever it is, Morton has a building for you. They're professionally built for your needs. They really do take time to find out what you want. I've had a lot of friends that do Morton buildings, and they take time to find out exactly what you want, what your budget is, and then they design a building just for you. So right now you can save through February on new buildings during their building value days. And to learn more, visit mortonbuildings.com/project/thequestrian. You don't have to remember that. We'll put it in the show notes right here. Or you can give them a call at 800-447-7436. That's mortonbuildings.com. Thanks, Dennis. Well, we have our next guest coming up, and we're going to be talking dung beetles. But before we do that, we wanted to let you know that State Line Tack is doing its annual January warehouse clearance sale. Now, the number of items are very limited here. You basically take a risk. You buy it. It tells you how many items are left, but if somebody orders it before you, don't get it. So head on over there and give it a try. You may get something at a very discounted price. I'm looking, how many pages do they have? A lot. They have 10 pages, or it says here, 6,000 deals. So definitely head on over there to check it out today. I'm seeing coolers. I'm seeing blankets. I'm seeing helmets. I'm seeing boots. Matter of fact, they have the Oak Ladies Winter Paddock boot for 30% off. I'm seeing that there. And they just have a ton of different stuff. I know if you have some money left after Christmas, or you got some Christmas money, then now's the time to head to the warehouse clearance at statelinetack.com. This Horse Health Report is brought to you by Daily Dose Equine, non-GMO core nutrition for horses and ponies of all ages. We have Jane Myers on with us. She's from equiculture.net, and she's going to be talking to us today about dung beetles, and I'm so very excited. I've been wanting to have this conversation for a long time. And Jane, where are you from? Where are you out of?
Well, I live in the north of England currently. We spent many years living in Australia, and that's actually where I learned a lot about dung beetles, because dung beetles are a big business, if you like, over there. But pretty much all countries have them. But we were fortunate enough to live in Australia for so long and learn about them there, and then apply that knowledge in other places that we've lived. So, yeah. Currently north of England.
All right, terrific. And I live in Florida, and we kind of have the same, nasty bugs and other things that Australia has. So we get a lot of dung beetles as well. And as a horse husband, one of our jobs is we can do the simple stuff. So we get sent out to clean the paddocks and things like that. And of course, we're always running into dung beetles, or you go out there and the poop piles are spread around and you're mad at the dung beetles. But that's why we want to solve some of the misconceptions. The first question I have for you is, how does a dung beetle know there's poop on the ground?
As far as I know, they smell it. And they're actually always seeking fresh manure. So, for instance, if you spread composted manure on your land, that wouldn't attract the dung beetles. What they actually need is a fresh pile of manure, and they fly to that pile usually within hours of it being passed by the horse. So it has to be relatively fresh, if you like.
So they fly to the pile? Because we always see them digging holes and dragging it down with them, right? But they fly to get to the pile?
Oh, absolutely. Yes, that's how they get around. Yeah, they if you look at them closely, they have because they're a beetle, and they look under that hard shell, that's a wing. So yes, they fly around.
See, I know.
Usually in the evening. It's usually the evening, as far as I know, when they fly.
Because I've only ever seen them dragging it down the hole. When you go to pick the pile, and they're dragging it down the hole. So, are they good? What good things do dung beetles do for our farms?
That's a good question. I mean, there's a list as long as your arm, but they are the world's dung management expert, and what they do with dung, as humans, we could never come close to doing what they do. So, for instance, they do things because they take it underground. First of all, they're getting rid of a lot of that manure off the surface. They're stopping you having to pick it up. They're taking the nutrients a long way down into the ground, so then the roots of the plants then have to grow much further down to reach those nutrients. So because the roots grow longer, the grass above ground grows taller. They're stopping manure from getting into the waterways. They're making it so that your horses will eat the whole paddock rather than leave certain areas. And a really important one, which is why they got into them so much in Australia, is that they're vastly reducing how many worming chemicals you need to use on your horse, because when they take worm larvae so far down underground, the worm larvae, those parasitic worms, have no way of getting back up to the surface. So when you have dung beetles working, you lose a lot less, if hardly any, worming chemical. And as we know, that's a huge deal, because horses now, the worms themselves are becoming immune's the wrong word, resistant to the chemicals in worming chemicals. They don't work on them as well. So that's one of the other big pluses as well. So they've got numerous benefits. They are really, truly incredible creatures, much like a lot of things in nature. If as humans we just learn to look at what nature does, nature already has it worked out. We just have to follow suit, really.
So, that's a good point. I'm wondering, does worm medicine affect dung beetles? In other words, if you
Yeah, that's a good point, because that is the sort of catch-22 of the situation. If you use a lot of worming chemicals, you will actually be inhibiting the dung beetles on your land, because especially at the larval stage, if they take manure down to their larvae, which are underground, and that has worming chemical in it, then often that will kill. There's slight differences in different chemicals, but it will kill the larvae. So then that next season, there'll be less dung beetles, if any, and so on. So it mainly kills them at the larval stage, but that's really important because, like I said, it kills next season's dung beetles. But the thing is, if people learn about them, then they don't have to realise they don't have to use as much worming chemical, if any. and or manage it better, and then they'll help the dung beetles, and then in turn, in next year, they'll need even less worming chemical. So instead, we should be doing things like testing manure, having your horse tested, rather, a fecal egg count to see if it's got any worms in the first place, or if it has a high level of worms, and only use those chemicals when they're absolutely necessary. And when you do use them, perhaps keep the horse in a yard for a few days, in a tiny paddock or a yard, a surfaced area, pick up all the manure and make sure that manure doesn't get out onto the land and affect the dung beetles.
It's interesting. The last farm we were at here in Florida, we were there for like 8 years, and we would get the testing done, and we very seldom had to worm in those 8 years because the tests came back. But we had a lot of dung beetles at that property.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. That's
very interesting. I never thought about putting the two together there.
Yeah, that's right. Absolutely. They're totally correlated. So in Australia, they're actually saying that now in some areas, because dung beetles, imported dung beetles in Australia's case, have been so successful that they're not actually going to have to use worming chemicals at all in the future in some areas, especially on cattle and so on, because they work for cattle as well as horses, obviously. All grazing, they work for all animals. But yeah, so whereas Australia had to import their dung beetles because they didn't have native large grazing herbivores naturally, so they've had to import the dung beetles that go with those large grazing herbivores. Countries like us, areas like the Americas and here in Europe, we already have dung beetles because the large grazing herbivores have always been here, and so therefore dung beetles have always been here as well.
That's interesting. I know I read one of the other things they do is because they do dig into the soil. Obviously, they're aerating the ground like
Absolutely.
You would use a mechanical aerator to get more water down there to feed your grass, right?
Yeah, again, another amazing thing. Instead of having to use a machine to aerate the soil, they're doing it for you, and they can go through the hardest, most compacted soil imaginable, some of them. It's absolutely incredible what they can get through, so... Again, another thing, that means more water gets into the soil, more air gets into the soil. They just massively turn around the situation from hard, dead, compacted soil into creating life, because also then somehow earthworms get the message that the soil is going to be better for them, and then they move in, and then they do their thing as well, which, again, massively improves your soil. So you can... Just this little creature can turn your soil around from dead almost to a wonderful, rich soil. They are absolutely amazing. They really are. You can tell I get very excited.
I can tell. And what I always found amazing about him was this little tiny dung beetle can carry a piece of poop 10 times its size. It's just...
I know.
They're also
amazing.
Weightlifters, apparently. Because
Do
they
amazing.
eat the poop, or do they eat something that's in the poop?
They take it down, and it's the nutrients that are in it that their larvae feed on down in the lower down in the soil.
Larvae that feeds on.
When you think about it, there's lots of nutrients in that manure, horse manure or cattle manure or whatever they're taking down, and it's those nutrients that they then feed their larvae on.
Yeah. Now, out in Oklahoma, you're a little drier. Do you have a lot of dung beetles out there?
In where, sorry?
No, I'm asking Jamie. Do you have a lot in Oklahoma? She lives in a much drier area than we do.
Yeah, I don't think I see a lot of those here.
Yeah, there's huge variation in where you see them. And it's not necessarily, because it can be too wet for dung beetles as well, but it's things like dung beetles, in order to actually get going, they need a certain amount, I don't know what exactly that amount is, but they need a certain amount of animals in a given area. So just say, for instance, if you're a horse property, but you live in the suburbs, you wouldn't have dung beetles because they need quite a large area of other grazing animals in order to survive.
You know what I just heard, Glenn? I heard her telling me that I need more horses. And I am super happy to comply.
And a few cows as well. Yeah, a few cows, a few goats.
Some cows, some camels, whatever poops. You just need more of it.
Yeah.
That's funny.
Yeah.
Well, what else? What takeaways do you want to leave us with as far as dung beetles are concerned? Don't squish them.
I'd say just learn a little bit about them to people. Just we've got a video on our website, for instance, which will tell you all sorts of interesting facts and things. There's books out there that There's a really good book written in Australia called Dung Down Under, and even though it's Australian, it's an absolutely fantastic book, and it's very tongue-in-cheek, very funny. But just learn a bit about them, because they might turn your life around in terms of, even if things like, you're fed up of picking up horse poop, suddenly there's no reason to do it anymore. If you have, as long as you don't have, say, 20 horses on an acre, then you will have to pick up your manure. Right. But when you have a reasonable, level of stocking rate, then, just that alone can make such a huge difference. But yeah, it's something that's well worth learning about, is what I would say. Learn about them and profit from them, because they are just incredible.
Jane, where can people find, what website do they go to find the information?
So you read it out earlier, but basically it's just equiculture.net. So equiculture, all one word, .net.
And what else do you have on there? You have all kinds of things about property management and pasture management, all kinds of things on there.
Lots on there, including a little free course that people can do. There's things about mulching, which is another really exciting, as far as I'm concerned, topic. There's a little video on there about that. There's all sorts of videos. So lots of things on there for people to learn about alternatives that will save them time and money and be good for the environment all at the same time.
I think this is terrific. Thank you so much for joining us. We really appreciate it. I'm finally learned about dung beetles. I learned something.
Thanks so much, Glenn and Jamie. Thank you.
All right,
thank you.
Jane.
And thanks for telling me I need more horses.
Absolutely.
Her husband will be calling you shortly, I think.
He will. That's okay.
Bye, Jane.
Okay. Thank you. Bye.
There you go. All you ever wanted to know about dung beetles. It is interesting because the farm that the horses are at now have a lot less of them, and it's kind of in a suburb. There's less horses. Where we were before, it was surrounded by horses, and it was more rural, and we had a ton of them. And she's right. We didn't have a worm problem there.
Yeah, I remember them pretty significantly in Kentucky when I lived there. Like they would poop, and 5 seconds later, there's beetles in it. I'm like, how did they get there? It's so weird.
I didn't know they flew. That was news on me. I thought, because I've only ever seen them come up and down and out of the ground.
See, to me, that's terrifying. We all have our own thing.
But it is interesting. Well, thank you to Jane. She's a wealth of knowledge on many different things that we never even thought to talk about before. So we're going to hear from Daily Dose, and then we're going to do some weird news.
Non-GMO whole food nutrition is the basis of the entire Daily Dose Equine program. We never forget that natural is better and simplicity is key. Daily Dose Equine uses non-GMO whole food ingredients like alfalfa, timothy, peas, sunflower seeds, and flax. Daily Dose Equine doesn't use fillers, bulking agents, or leftovers from other industries, so you can feed less, yet improve body condition and energy. And our feeds are free from chemical residues and glyphosate. Find the perfect formulation for your horse at dailydoseequine.com. Select Daily Dose Equine formulations are available nationwide through Chewy.com and TractorSupply.com.
Time to learn why some days you're embarrassed to be part of the human race. In Jamie's Weird News.
Yeah, that's right. There's never a shortage of weird things happening in these United States, especially Florida, the South in general. But we're going to cover things that happen all over the globe today, Glenn. And I would like to thank these wonderful people for sending me weird news stories. If you're ever reading the news and you're like, that's super weird, email it to me, jamie@horseradionetwork.com. Weird news in the subject line. Again, I cannot read all of y'all's dirty stories on the show, but I do really enjoy reading them about myself. So thank you for all of those. The one about the guy cutting his wiener off, that was a little too much, but it's fine.
Yeah, you just did it.
Don't slow down. Don't stop him. Yeah. Okay. So I would like to thank Victoria, Delia, Stephanie, Laureen, Claire, Allison, Alicia, Kaylin, Amanda, Danielle, Sandy, Jolyn, Maggie, Lindsay, and Laurie, all for sending me weird news stories.
You got a whole team going there.
I do. I love it. I love it so much. So, I'm from Georgia. I was born in Georgia. My daddy's from Georgia. My whole family lives in Georgia. And so I feel like it's okay for me to do the accent of a place in the South. So if you get offended, send your complaints to Jennifer at horseradionetwork.com. She puts them in a special file. Okay. So I'm going to talk to you about, there was a lady and she was she was a manager in training at McDonald's. And this is in High Point, North Carolina. And her name, let's say, I don't know her name, but it's not really important. So she is in training and she calls her husband and she's like, hey, there's some people here that is disrespecting me at the McDonald's. And she called her husband and her husband was like, that ain't going to fly. That is not how things are going to work. So 57-year-old Dwayne Waden came up to defend his wife's honor because she was getting disrespected while she was training to be a manager at the McDonald's in High Point, North Carolina. Well, he came up there and he was going to make it known that they were not allowed to disrespect his woman. And so he disrespected the guy who was disrespecting her by punching him in the face repeatedly and then trying to push the cook's head towards the deep fryer. He was going to push the guy's head in the deep fryer for disrespecting his woman. Can you imagine how terrible that would be? So several employees had to pull him off the victim. There was a large contusion on his forehead, his right eye, scratches on his neck. And so, I mean, there's cameras in the McDonald's, people. So there's video surveillance footage. Do you know who Dwayne Waden is?
No.
Not Dwayne Wade, the basketball player. Dwayne Waden. He's the local pastor. He is the pastor of Elevated Life International Ministries.
They don't teach turn the other cheek at that church.
No, they eye for an eye
Punch
at that
the other
church.
cheek.
Oh my God.
Fry the other cheek.
Like, it's not a great story until you realize he's a local pastor.
Oh my God. And by the way, is there a McDonald's manager in the world that's not disrespected? They're all disrespected.
I mean, that's kind of part of the job.
I mean, oh my God. I'm still stuck on the frying part. Ugh.
Oh, God. It's terrible. Oh, by the way, he's in jail, so you know.
Oh, yeah. Okay, good. He's preaching his sermon in jail this Sunday?
Yeah. Y'all, this time we're going to stay in the South, okay? And this time we're going to head to Alabama, okay? Because there was a 42-year-old Alabama man was driving through town. It's just outside of Birmingham, and he wrecked his car right in front of the Bass Pro Shop. Okay, y'all. So he wrecks his car in front of the Bass Pro Shop. And you know what he decides to do, Glenn? Well, he decides to strip down naked and run inside the Bass Pro Shop. And if you've ever been inside a Bass Pro Shop, they've got a really beautiful aquarium they show of all the fish that you can catch. It's a real big thing. So what this man decided to do was to run in there after stripping down naked and go for a swim. So what he did is he ran up to the aquarium, and it says he did a, quote, cannonball leap into the aquarium. God. Now, remember, these are giant things, and there's glass like halfway up. And so all that water from his cannonball like splooshed over the edge into the store. By the way, I would like to thank the person who sent me the video. Unfortunately, it was pixelated on his wiener, but I did appreciate the whole idea of, I mean, she sent it to me twice. She sent me like, here's the story. Oh, by the way, I found the video. Here it is. And not only did he cannonball, then the police came and they said, get out of the water, get out of the water. So he climbs out of the water and stands underneath the waterfall. That is also part of it. And he's like, you know what? I'm not coming in. And so what does he do? He headfirst dives into the pool yet again. It's like this whole thing. It was like a whole 5 minutes of him swimming around in this tank, getting out, jumping back in.
Because none of those cops were getting in to get him out.
Well, how did they get him out, Glenn?
Fishing pole? They get him out? Please tell me a fishing pole.
Here's what happened. So he was up, pressed again, naked, up against the glass. Like holding on, like right hand up, left hand up, head over the glass while his naked self was pressed against the glass.
We get the idea.
Okay, just you're getting feedback. I needed to know. So then he's like, I'm gonna get out. And so what does he do? He climbs over the glass edge and falls. And it's like
it's a story
like a 30-foot.
Yeah,
it's a story
way
tall.
Up there.
He falls. He climbs over, and I guess he thought the ground was right there. And no, he fell all the way down, knocked himself unconscious, and then they arrested him.
It made it easier to arrest him anyway.
I know. We didn't have to go in or nothing.
Oh, drugs are bad, kids. Drugs are bad.
Drugs are bad.
Oh, my
Thank
God.
You.
He has to have been intoxicated on something. We just went to Bass Pro Shops. I didn't see anything like that.
I mean, you got to be in Alabama, Glenn. I mean, Florida, you thought it'd be okay, but turns out you got to go to Alabama. So now we are going to. Do you know what a Point Breeze dog is?
No idea, but our dog conversation on Monday got us in trouble.
Yes, and speaking of the dog conversation on Monday, I had a study that showed where what the most popular dog in each state was, and I didn't buy it. So I went on to our auditor Facebook page and I said, "Okay, please let me know what state you live in and what kind of dog you have. I'm giving you till Thursday night, and then I'm going to compile the list and I'm going to write down each state. So I'm going to have a full report for you about these dogs." And not one person has mentioned that they have a Point Breeze dog. And I would like to tell you that is a good thing. It looks like a golden doodle, like a poodle crossed with a hound, like a hunting dog. I don't know. It's a really weird looking dog. But he has very strange eating habits. That's right. His name is Cecil. And they say he is a very good boy. Clay Law is the owner, and he says he's a very good boy. If you left a steak on the counter, he would not eat it. Okay, would never ever do anything wrong.
Kind of doubting that myself.
Until they were having some work done in the house, and they were having to pay in cash. So Clay Law put an envelope with $4,000 on his counter for home improvements, and unfortunately, about 30 minutes later, they went to get the money and they found their dog eating the money.
Oh my God.
$4,000 gone. Well, as you can imagine, that did not agree with Cecil's digestive tract.
Didn't agree with anybody.
So they said he turned into what they called a doggy ATM.
Please tell me they fished it out and washed it.
They were pulling out money. They got together with the bank, and the bank was like, "Here's what you're going to do." So they had to pull out the money, wash it. It came out of both ends, Glenn. Both ends. Oh. Pulling these things and having to, it's like money laundering, but really. They had to wash the money. They ended up recovering $3,550.
Oh, wow. Well, that's good. They got most of it back.
They got most of it back. A vet has checked the 100-pound Cecil, and they say he's doing well.
You can, if you even have a part of a $1 bill or $10 bill or whatever, you can bring it in and they will replace it. I didn't know that they would replace it after this certain circumstance.
I guess they said, here's what you're going to have to do.
All of us that have owned dogs all our entire lives, there's been one point in the dog's life that you've had to dig through the poop for something they ate. We've all done it, but I can't imagine pulling out that many 20s.
Yeah. I wouldn't let $4,000 go, but most things I'm just going to let it
go. Oh my God. Today's traumatizing. Frying heads, picking through poop. It's traumatizing.
Okay, so for this last one, I couldn't decide, but one of our fantastic listeners sent us a newspaper headlines that push the limits of human stupidity. And it's kind of weird news stories, but they're headlines of papers. And I'm just going to read some of the headlines to you. Most of them actually ended up kind of being like a study show kind of segment, but also just really proofread. I feel like a newspaper should have editors, maybe because
there's the AI wrote the titles and they'd never proofed it.
I think a lot of these are even before AI. Okay. So we're going to start with this one. It says homicide victims rarely talk to police.
That's true.
You have to be kind of smart to think about these. That is a true
statement.
Yeah. I mean, most of it's true. Like this one, breathing oxygen has been linked to staying alive.
Studies show
that teen pregnancy drops off significantly after age 25.
I'd say it dropped off significantly at the age of 20 myself, but
when you're not a teen. China may be using the sea to hide its submarines. Federal agents raid gun shop, find weapons. I have pictures of all of these, by the way. I'm not making these up. It's not somebody just wrote it down. I have pictures of them, and some of them I've even read some of the article underneath. One is a nuclear explosion would be a disaster.
Yeah, no kidding.
Bugs flying around with wings are called flying bugs.
And apparently we can put dung beetles in that category.
Yeah. Now this one, it took me a minute. Northfield plans to plan strategic plan. And I even so this is what I read a little bit. It says the EDA recently, this is how good they are at this newspaper. Okay. I don't know the place. The EDA recently created a steering committee to discuss the process of created a strategic plan for Northfield. Y'all need help. Y'all need to hire more employees.
We need to plan, and who's going to plan the plan?
Jay Cronley wrote this wonderful article called "One-Armed Man Applauds the Kindness of Strangers."
Okay, that's just bad. That's just bad.
Sometimes you think maybe like they wrote these to be funny.
That one was just rude.
This is a sports one. Tiger Woods plays with his own balls, Nike says.
Okay, and the fact that it's Tiger Woods is kind of...
Mississippi's literacy program shows improvement.
Well, good. I'm glad.
Only problem is Mississippi is spelled wrong.
Oh, I thought you were going to say literacy was spelled wrong.
Survey finds fewer deer after hunt.
No, really? Wow.
Barbershop, this one has a picture attached and everything. Barbershop singers bring joy to school for deaf.
It's the vibrations, Jamie. It's the vibrations.
Yeah, exactly. Most earthquake damage has been found to be caused by the shaking.
As opposed to?
Now, this one, it's just punctuation is important, people, or I don't know, rewording sentences. This says students cook and serve grandparents. Let's see. Yellow objects. This is from what are the newspapers that you read in the checkout line?
Oh, like one of the Entertainment Today, the weekly or
this
whatever.
Is
yeah.
Yellow object spotted in sky. It could be the sun. Let's see. Man found. Oh, here's our last one. Because a lot of these are awesomely inappropriate. I will go with this one. Man found dead in graveyard. Thank you, everybody, for sending in your weird news
We needed
stories.
that after these other stories to cleanse.
Thank you, everybody, for sending your weird news stories. Again, if you see a weird news, let me start over. If you are reading the news, I'm all flustered, and you see a story that you're like, that's super weird, email it to me, jamie@horseradionetwork.com with weird news in the subject line. Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Claire. Thank you, Glenn. You're just awesome. I needed a show like today, so it's awesome.
Yeah, I think, Dung Beetles, I think, was perfect for today. So
just let's talk stuff. Let's talk some poop.
All right, auditors, hang on. We'll be right with you. Thanks, everybody, for joining us.
I'm going to tell you in the post show something I'm doing that is very anti-me.
And tomorrow you can hear the NRHA. And Friday, really bad ads.
And the dog survey results.